Chapter 567, Shadow in the Forest. Of the men below, there were two who were the head guards of the Wang family in Skybearing. In Ling Tian's memories, one of their martial arts weren't too bad. There were a few times where he had disguised himself as one of Wang Bo's followers to protect him in the brothels. Coincidentally, Wang Bo was with Ling Tian during those few times. Of course, this was when Ling Tian was still the #1 profligate in Skybearing, and this young noble Wang Bo was one of the 3 profligate young masters in Skybearing. Up until now, Ling Tian could still remember that Wang Bo was always dressed in green robes like he was a walking bamboo stick. However, Ling Tian had never placed Wang Bo in his sights because Wang Bo was truly a profligate young master of a noble family. Thus, Ling Tian was truly shocked by how Wang Bo actually had a hidden identity. Could it be that he was also feigning to be a pig to eat the tigers? Ling Tian was puzzled. Ever since the Ling family took over Skybearing, not many changes were made to the original officials. Thus, the Wang family was still in their original post, and Ling Tian was certain that the soldiers guarding Tai City were also under the Wang family's command. For these individuals to appear here at this moment, their motive was obvious. Ling Tian clenched his teeth. So it turned out that the imperial tutor, Wang Zihong, was actually someone of the Zhao family. Furthermore, they were in power for so many years already. Just when did the Zhao family begin coveting Skybearing? This matter was far too shocking. Ling Tian was confident that he would be able to unify the continent and bring peace to the land. However, when he was scheming against others, weren't others also scheming against him? He previously made a bet with Yu Manlu of the world as the stakes, and now there was a mole of the Zhao family holding such a high position in Skybearing. To think that the Zhao family that he had never placed within his sights actually had such deep planning. Did he truly look down too much on the heroes of the world? This truth had undeniably set off the alarm bells in Ling Tian's head. I must use this incident as a warning. If I want to rule over the world, I must not look down on any enemy, be it the Yu, Shui or Zhao families. Since they are able to stay alive for 1,000 years, they must definitely have their means of survival. From now on, I must definitely be more careful. The lucky star would not be shining on me all the time. Hearing the conversation of the two individuals, it seemed like Wang Bo had already gone on ahead to receive their allied forces. Those allied forces were without a doubt forces from the Zhao family. In just an instant, a light bulb lit up in Ling Tian's head and he decided on a brilliant plan. Looking in Ling Tian's direction, Ling Tian signaled to Ling Tian to kill everyone present. He then placed a finger on his lips to remind Ling Tian to not make a huge commotion. In just a moment, these people who just came out from hiding were going to face the biggest nightmare of their lives. Ling Tian's figure slipped down from the tree silently and he landed without making a single sound. Beneath the tree, 3 burly men took their last breath without even letting out a groan. With another step forward, 4 small dots could be seen on another 4 necks as they collapsed onto the ground. On Ling Tian's side, his figure darted around in the shadows like a ghost, and under the cover of the darkness, more than 10 people had their lives reaped by him. The 2 of them had split up the work extremely clearly, with one taking the left and the other taking the right. Their figures darted around like a bolt of lightning and they were undetectable like spirits. Before anyone noticed anything, more than 30 people had already taken a step into the underworld. In the air, a bloody smell gradually became thicker. In the middle of a clearing, someone rubbed his nose and asked with doubt, "What is this smell? Why is it so fishy? Is anyone injured?" The moment he mentioned it, a few others also realized that something wasn't right, and the one in the lead immediately let out a roar, "Gather immediately! There is something strange going on." Flurried footsteps could be heard and the burly men who were spread out in all directions gathered towards the clearing. The leader who was in charge of them was immediately dumbfounded upon seeing all of his men. Of his 120 men, less than 70 were able to make it back to his side. Where did the rest go? There wasn't a single groan, nor was there the shadow of a blade. Before they even managed to spot where the enemy was, almost half of his men were killed. Just what was going on? Could there be a ghost? In the darkness, the vague outline of a dozen people could be seen leaning on the tree motionlessly in a weird posture after the order to gather was given. At the same time, the fishy smell of blood floated over in the breeze. This wasn't their first time out in the pugilistic world, and they all understood that their brothers had met with an accident. Old for Wang, a broken bar. Damn it, Where are you?" The leader could not believe in what he was seeing and shouted out for his partner's name while holding onto the last bit of hope in his heart. The anxiousness and panic in his voice could not be concealed at all. However, his question was greeted by the silence of the night and the drifting fog, making the forest even more eerie. Everyone could feel that something wasn't right and they all broke out into a cold sweat, shuffling on the spot with their palms drenched in sweat. The surroundings were completely silent, but there seemed to be ferocious beasts lurking behind the fog, biding their time to launch a sure kill attack. The atmosphere of the forest was filled with death, and this atmosphere made the hearts of the burly men palpitate in fear. A series of clanging sounds could be heard, and the burly men had all unsheathed their weapons as they raised their guards and watched the surroundings carefully. Their weapons reflected the light of the moon, and when this light was reflected onto the faces of the burly men, all of their expressions were extremely pale without any exceptions. In a state of extreme fear, someone's teeth began chattering, and this usually inaudible sound was like thunder in the silent forest. "Duchi, go and take a look at old Four Wang and see what is wrong with him." The leader grabbed onto his sword and ordered. His face was filled completely with perspiration, but he did not dare to even wipe the perspiration off his face. A black-robed man acknowledged the order as he walked forward, prepared to give up his life. He held onto his blade carefully and walked towards old Four Wang slowly with a rustling sound. For some reason, in the ears of these extremely frightened individuals, this rustling sound sounded like the rhythm of death. Seeing Duchi approach old Four Wang, everyone stared at him intently without daring to even blink. Duchi finally plucked up his courage and walked up to old Four Wang's body. Taking a look down, he saw that old Four Wang had a strange smile on his face with his eyes wide open. At the same time, a thin red mark could be seen on his neck, and he had obviously stopped breathing for a long time already. In a state of shock, Duchi took a step back by reflex and felt like his throat was filled with sand. Just as he turned around and was about to say something, he heard the gasp of his fellow comrades. Old Four Wang, who was originally a dead man, suddenly stood up with a weird smile on his face and pounced towards Duchi. Duchi felt his soul leave his body in fright, and he actually forgot to swing out his own weapon. He then felt a sharp pain in his chest, and a long sword was quickly retracted back into the darkness. The wound was small, and while the sword had penetrated through his chest and reaped his life, Duchi's blood could not spray out but could only gather into his abdomen. Duchi felt a wave of warmth and comfort spread throughout his body, and during this moment before death, Duchi felt as though his feeling of death was different from what others had experienced. This is because Duchi actually felt happiness. 1. In the eyes of the others, they saw that old Four Wang, who was supposed to be dead, had suddenly jumped up and pounced towards Duchi. They then collapsed without making any noise, and during this period of time, Duchi actually did not even bother retaliating. Instead, it seemed as though he was excitedly embracing death and filled with satisfaction and happiness. This scene was far too weird, abnormal and baffling. A person who was already dead killed someone who was there to check on him, and the person who was killed was actually filled with satisfaction and happiness. This was just too frightening for such a scene to occur in the already eerie forest. Everyone felt their hair stand up on edge as though something was about to explode. They felt their backs turn cold and a chilly sensation by their ears, as though someone was blowing wind into their ears. Everyone present had an identical reaction. Their eyes spun around in fear, but their bodies seemed to weigh a ton and they were completely incapable of making a single movement. Extreme fear ruined the mental capacity of everyone present. None of them realized that during the moment they went still, two shadows flashed past the 10 or more people at the rear, and they silently collapsed onto the ground. When the last person collapsed onto the ground, the soft thud snapped everyone back to their senses. Their comrade, who was standing alive and well before them previously, was now on the ground lifelessly. Everyone was filled with incredulity. It was just too strange. Just how did they die? Could there truly be spirits playing them like a fool? Looking at the sight of their comrade's death, someone couldn't take it any longer and bent down while puking profusely. Everyone seemed to have woken up from a nightmare as they let out a miserable scream. Their leader was drenched in sweat as his voice trembled. A broken bar charge, a broken bar charge out, a broken bar charge out first before anything, a broken bar. Chapter 568, Laying a Trap. In the frightening forest, More than half of the 120 people had perished, with less than 60 of them left alive. Even those who were usually the bolder ones among the remaining did not have the courage to remain in the forest. They could not be bothered about their horses and rushed out towards the exit of the forest. There seemed to be a frightening demon within the forest, and they all wanted to escape from this vile demon. As for the corpses of their comrades, none of them could be concerned at all. All of a sudden, a chilly light flashed past, and the heads of the few people charging at the front flew up in the air. Countless headless corpses continued running forward before they finally collapsed onto the ground. A wave of shrieks sounded, and everyone immediately stopped running. Before they could even make another sound, the sound of bodies collapsing onto the ground could be heard behind them, and the last 6 to 7 people in the group collapsed onto the ground. There was actually not a single trace of injury on their bodies, but only extreme fear on their faces. A faintly discernible figure then appeared in front of everyone like an illusion, and a thin glowing light could be seen in his hands. His cold sharp gaze then sliced through the night sky and landed coldly on all the burly men. Anyone who met his eyes felt as though they were stabbed in the chest by a sharp sword, and instinctively turned away, not daring to meet his gaze. There were a few who took a few steps back with their bodies trembling, and just when they were about to turn around to flee, a black-robed figure drifted in midair and revealed a bright smile to those turning around. He even waved his hands and cheerfully greeted, "Hello, hello everyone. Good evening." His tone was actually extremely amiable. "Good evening." The fellow who killed them without a trace in this pitch-black darkness was actually floating in midair and giving them such a warm greeting. All of a sudden, 2 of the individuals who turned around let out a groan, and their faces turned purplish before they collapsed weakly onto the ground without any signs of breathing. They had actually died from shock. Right when everyone was in a state of panic and shock, Ling Tian and Ling Jian unleashed their attacks again. With one from the front and the other the rear, the 2 of them reaped the lives of the remaining individuals like they were hard-working farmers collecting their harvest. From beginning to the end, less than 10 groans could be heard from the more than 50 individuals as they went on to their afterlives. Not a single one of them remained alive. Clang! Ling Jian sheathed his sword and said with a tinge of pity, "I lost to young noble by 1. Ling Tian chuckled and said with a carefree tone, "Your performance was splendid. In this world, you are the only one capable of competing with me in terms of killing speed. Even justice would be incomparable to me in killing speed." Ling Jian's eyes lit up before he was dejected again. "However, young noble did not even use a weapon, but I used all my strength." Ling Tian patted Ling Jian on the shoulders and encouraged, "Don't be discouraged, Jian. In terms of killing speed, you are number 2 in the world. I dare to say that even justice wouldn't be a match for you. However, you are not going to be competing with him on killing speed in the future." Ling Tian then turned around and walked off with his arms folded. He had already given Ling Jian a hint, but whether or not Ling Jian was able to comprehend it was up to him. Ling Tian liked to use such a method to guide Ling Jian and the rest. Ling Tian had always believed that something that they comprehend themselves was far better than just hearing it from the mouth of their master. The results had also shown that his method of education was pretty effective. At the very least, it was effective with Ling Jian and the rest. Sending out a signal, Ling Kai and Feng Mo led their troops and entered the forest. Seeing the corpses littered all over the forest, even these fellows who were used to seeing blood could not help but be startled. None of them expected Ling Jian and Ling Tian to complete a one-sided massacre in this short amount of time. Not a single one of the more than 100 people were left alive. At the same time, they could only hear 1 or 2 miserable shrieks from the outside of the forest, and the battle was settled. In a short few minutes, the 500 elites that Ling Tian had brought had entered the forest. They gathered the corpses to the side and buried them underground. After that, they laid down an ambush about half a mile from where the clearing was. Ling Tian's ambush was at a completely different level than the Shui family's ambush. This was a truly killing trap, and the lethality of it was something that the spoiled brats of the Shui family would never be able to understand. Since Wang Bo was personally receiving the Zhao family's troops, his direction would definitely be the exact opposite of Ling Tian's and would definitely return here again. If not, it would be pointless for him to arrange for manpower to be stationed at this clearing. If that's the case, Ling Tian felt that he would be letting down the goodwill of his old buddy if he did not lay an ambush here. He would be an idiot if he didn't enjoy the meat placed beside his mouth. The reason why Ling Tian decided to lay the ambush half a mile away was out of the consideration of the lingering bloody smell. If the lingering smell of blood were to reveal their plan, their ambush wouldn't be perfect. While the clearing was a more suitable place to set up an ambush, Ling Tian still decided to be careful and change the location of the ambush. Ling Kai led 100 men up the trees and the weapons which they carried were all smeared with poison. Feng Mo led 200 men and positioned himself at the right while the other Blood Iron Guard, Wang Ji, also led 200 men and positioned himself at the left. Ling Jian was in charge of sealing their enemy's retreat and Ling Tian was in charge of the killing zone. In the center of the killing zone, Ling Tian scattered bags of poisonous powder that would take effect as long as one breathed it in. The moment a fight broke out, the powder on the ground would be kicked up and in the darkness, plenty of people would definitely fall prey. Ling Tian had even made use of the vines in the tree to create traps. In just a short hour, Ling Tian's arrangements made Ling Jian, who was standing off to the side, gasp in shock. In Ling Jian's eyes, Ling Tian had made use of practically everything in the forest that was of use. However, Ling Tian still seemed to be dissatisfied and unsheathed his sword to make an incision on the branches of the trees. Ling Jian could imagine that the moment the martial arts experts enter the forest and realize that there is an ambush, they would jump up to avoid the attacks before grabbing onto the branches to observe the situation around them. If the branches were to give way at this moment, what kind of a pitiful situation would await these experts? The way Ling Jian saw it, Ling Tian's ambush was akin to a form of art. However, he did not know that if Li Zhu was here, she would definitely remark that Ling Tian's trap-laying skills had deteriorated. Even if there wasn't enough time, Ling Tian should come up with something better. At the very least, he should smear poison or line up needles and hidden weapons at the branches and vines. After Ling Tian finally finished his preparations, he shook his head and sighed. Our preparations aren't very sufficient, but this will have to do. I hope that they will be of some use. Ling Jian and the others who heard Ling Tian say this had their jaws wide open in shock. In Ling Jian's eyes, such an elaborate setup was sufficient to even kill justice. But Ling Tian still wasn't satisfied. Ling Tian grunted and looked at Ling Jian as though he saw through Ling Jian's thoughts. The trap that I used against justice was at least 3 times as frightening as the traps here. However, it was only sufficient to delay him slightly. Ling Jian, when facing a true expert and in front of absolute strength, there isn't such a thing as an assassination. You can only fight head-on. Regardless of when you launch an attack, the other party will definitely find out and be prepared. This is the difference between an expert and novice. When facing such an expert, do not ever think that you have the upper hand because you are in the dark. If you have such a thought, even if you are the #1 assassin in the world, you will only be a sparring partner for the enemy. Ling Jian nodded his head seriously and committed what Ling Tian had said to his memory before asking, "Young noble, in your eyes, how many of such experts are there in the world?" Ling Tian thought carefully before saying, "From the people who I have met, apart from Yu Man Lu who I just mentioned, there should be 3 more." In actual fact, Yu Man Lu only has deep cultivation but may not have achieved the state that I mentioned. As for the 3 others, justice is undoubtedly the #1. Ling Jian's eyes flashed. As for the other 2, young noble should be one of them, right? Then who is the last person? Shui Wubo from the Shui family. Young noble met him before? Ling Tian smiled. Jian, you think too highly of the #1 experts of those 1,000-year-old families. I have never seen Shui Wubo before, but he would be at Yu Man Lu's level at the most and cannot be compared to the 3 people in my list. As for the 3rd persona, Broken Bar Jian, who did you just lose to? Li Zhu. Ling Jian eyes widen with incredulity. Could it be that her accomplishments are so fantastic? Even the family head of a 1,000-year-old family, Yu Man Lu, cannot be compared to her? Chapter 569, Forest Ambush. Ling Yuan muttered irresolutely, "We can't compare like this." While Yu Man Lu's martial arts are indeed deep and profound, they are also extremely crafty. Not only is his cultivation above Li Zhu in minds, he probably practices another sort of demonic martial arts which has a high strength and killing power. However, what I'm referring to is not just purely martial skills, but rather referring to people who are not afraid to get assassinated. In this point, only Justice, who has reached the epitome of martial arts, is unafraid of any sort of assassination attempts that might come his way. Yu Manlu might possess great martial strength, but he is unable to reach the same state as Justice. However, if you were to try to assassinate him, even with careful planning, you're likely to be the one buried instead. This is also the reason why I'm not allowing you to do so, understand? In contrast, Li Zhu has another advantage compared to Yu Manlu that allows her to be unafraid of assassinations while he might be. What sort of advantage? Ling Tian pressed on. He found it impossible to believe that the little lass that looked like some frail chick could actually possess martial skill to this extent. Ling Tian had a meaningful smile on his face as he slowly said, "She has 2 millennia worth of experience that Yu Manlu does not have, maybe more." Finishing this weird sentence which had no head nor tail, Ling Tian laughed at Ling Tian's puzzled expression, flashing away in an instant. "Extra 2 millennia of experience? What does he mean? She's not even as old as me, what more experience?" Ling Tian shook his head, repeating Ling Tian's sentence, before melding into the darkness with a mind full of doubts. Right now, Wang Bo, or Great Noble Wang, had a belly full of repressed anger, having fought to be able to welcome the pinnacle experts from the above heavens, furthermore a peak expert said only to exist in legends. This Great Noble Wang had long ago planned and schemed in his heart how to utilize the hard work that he had contributed to his family to be able to be accepted under the master's tutelage. Let's not talk just about cultivating, but allowing him to go out and snatch a few ladies to play with in the future should be as easy as waving a hand, right? Right now, his body constitution wouldn't even allow him to carry a bucket of water without needing to rest for half a day. He had heard that an expert could just transfer 10 years worth of cultivation to you as though they were giving out chump change, but this would allow him to become a first-rate expert. Why was Ling Tian so outstanding? Wasn't it because he paid respects to a good teacher? That expert must have passed a lot of cultivation to Ling Tian. If not, he would still be like Daddy Wang here, a profligate. So long as I, Wang Bo, managed to cling on to the leg of a good teacher, would I still lose out to Ling Tian in any way? His own family had gone through years of fear and difficulty, helping the Zhao family so much. To ask such a thing should not be too overwhelming, right? To fulfill this beautiful dream of his, the young noble Wang Bo had been pestering his father non-stop to allow him to undertake this task on his own. He even swore a military vow that he would complete his task perfectly. Wang Taibo, upon seeing his son's incessant pestering, finally relented in a helpless manner. However, the 200 kilometers they traveled on horseback already filled this young noble Wang with so much pain that he was beginning to regret it. The bleak and miserable conditions of eating and sleeping in the wilds filled this young noble with much bitterness. However, when young noble Wang finally met with a fabled expert from the above heavens, his heart was totally frozen. That above heavens leader and top expert, Ming Ruoyun, had stared at our young noble Wang as though he was nothing more than a turd or a heap of rubbish. He didn't even bother to speak with him, let alone give him the opportunity to get into his good graces. The rest naturally followed in the lead of their grand elder Ming and treated Wang Bo like a slave. This made the originally proud and lofty, arrogant and domineering Wang Bo to have a belly full of anger. "This daddy here must be really cheap to you, having run out here tens of kilometers just to fetch you. And you actually treat me like so. If not for this daddy and his father, who would help you pieces of trash successfully get past the sky-bearing checkpoints to this place? FK, a bunch of ungrateful trash. What bullshit." On the way back, Wang Bo constantly pulled his hair, even forgetting about the matter of paying respects to a teacher. His only wish was to settle this bunch of mongrels before rushing back home, as his poor legs were already screaming in pain now. Damn it. He didn't even have a chance to make out yet with the little beauty he had just snatched, but how was he going to do anything in this condition? He could already see the edges of the forest in front of him. Just a little more, and it would be his followers Sir Broken Bar. Even if the number wasn't large, at least they all listened to him. Wang Bo spat out a mouth of turbid air, looking at the line of troops snaking behind him as he smiled to himself. When he had gathered all the men under him, he would then wave good riddance to this group of riffraff. What sort of people did they think they were? As he hatefully scolded inside himself, he respectfully led one of the three great experts of above heaven, Ming Yuoyun, into the forest. In order to ensure that their sneak attack would be a success this time, the above heavens sect really paid out in blood. Not only did they employ the Zhao family's secret troops, 3,000 of the violent dragon guardians, but they also brought out 12 inner disciples from their sect, as well as 100 outer sect disciples. Other than those who were deployed to Bright Jade City, this group of people comprised about half of their total fighting force, and their prowess was not to be underestimated. From the words of the sect master Meng Potian, other than the Yu family inside the Heavenly Star continent, there was no other force that couldn't be defeated within 2 hours. As such, it was a guaranteed success against the Skybearing's Ling family. The troop of men and horses slowly pierced into the forest, and Wang Bo estimated that in another few hundred meters they would reach the clearing designated by their men. That large clearing should be enough for this group of people to pitch their tents, right? Then his mission would also be considered completed and he would bolt at the first chance, going back to Skybearing to play. Walking at the very front was Ming Yuoyun, his white robes billowing around him as he carried this elegant demeanor, walking into the forest like an otherworldly immortal. His eyes were half closed, occasionally opening to survey his surroundings. The group consisting of over 1,000 trekked into the forest in perfect order. Stop! Everyone stop moving! Suddenly, Ming Yuoyun felt something amiss. This was a warrior's intuition. How was it that, even after so many people had entered the forest, they had not frightened off any birds along the way? This was out of common sense. Heightening his awareness, Ming Yuoyun's divine sense immediately became extremely cautious. This forest is a little strange. Why is it reeking of blood? What sort of bloody smell is this? Sniffing repeatedly, Ming Yuoyun suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed Wang Bo's neck, his expression turning stern. Kid, what sort of mischief are you up to? He did not even put the noble imperial tutor Wang in his heart, as though he was the Zhao family's guard dog. In his eyes, maybe they weren't even akin to dogs. Wang Bo had long been used to living a carefree life, so how would he understand what the smell meant? He stared blankly, but before he had the chance to answer, there came the sound of wind whooshing. From all directions the vines on the trees shot out huge arrows, with the arrowheads on them having been sharpened to the point they resembled arrows used by the gods and devils of the ninth heavens. In that instant they skewered through the group of above heaven's troops. The arrow shafts, which were in fact logs, were no light twigs, and if rammed into someone at that speed would certainly result in said person ending up with broken bones. A direct hit meant death, and even a graze would cause injuries. Every arrow's momentum did not stop even after piercing through the first person, continuing to pierce through person after person behind like a kebab. Simultaneously, screams of misery filled the entire forest and fresh blood inundated the entire area, turning it into a scene from hell. Limbs and organs flew all over the place and the horses stampeded around in a panic. Just the first round of arrows already caused 300 to 400 casualties. The offensive brought about by the huge logs had yet to end when su-su sounds were heard as the sky was blanketed by a multitude of arrows. The life-reaping arrows heartlessly pierced into the bodies and hearts of the troops present, and under the frantic stampede of everyone scrambling to run away, a grayish fog was stirred up from the ground. Putong, a broken bar. Those lucky ones who survived the assault from the huge logs now mysteriously fell on the ground after breathing in the fog. It was as though their legs had turned into jelly. A broken bar. Everyone is to hold their breath. This fog is a little strange. Ming Yuoyun held onto Wang Bo's skinny body as he twirled it around like a windmill, using him as a shield. In seconds, our young noble Wang had sadly turned into a human-sized porcupine. The rain of arrows however ceaselessly poured down, and the enemies hidden within the darkness had yet to reveal themselves, yet the above heavens had already suffered losses of near a third. Ming Yuoyun let out a long shout, his figure lifting off the ground as he threw away his human shield. His right hand shook and a resplendent sword appeared in his hand. At the same time, a few others from the above heavens sect also followed his actions, rising from the ground. While the arrows were sharp, they couldn't do much harm to someone of Ming Yuoyun's level. Since there was a poison fog on the ground, then they could only choose to perch in the trees in order to avoid the land and air pincer attack. This thought appeared in everyone's minds and they immediately flew up without any discussion. The sounds of metal clashing sounded all over as the above heavens sect pulled out their swords and deflected the arrows headed towards them. The other hand reached towards the nearest sturdy branch on the trees above them. So long as they were to pull themselves up, then they would be able to get out of their current scenario. Chapter 570, Kill Without Mercy. Kaka kaka broken bar. The sound of branches breaking could be heard the moment these experts came into contact with the tree branches. These strong-looking branches were suddenly as soft as tofu and broke apart without much force applied to them. Being caught off guard, these top-notch experts weren't any different from ordinary people. With their balance lost, they all pitifully collapsed back onto the ground. The energy that they used to dodge the arrows had already been expended and they fell back onto the ground without a chance to catch their breaths. All of these experts who were usually haughty and arrogant were now falling onto the ground like pancakes. The Ling family warriors who were already prepared let out another volley of arrows and the sharp arrows sliced through the night sky like they were locusts. The sound of arrows piercing through human bodies could be heard all around and countless miserable and desperate groans sounded through the forest. Despite the experts of above heavens being skilled in martial arts, at least half of them were wiped out by the rain of arrows. Of those left alive, every one of them were riddled with injuries and the arrows that they usually disdained were now the cry of the death god. The instant the branch snapped, Mingver Yuoyun knew that the situation was dire. Without a second of hesitation, he used his vitality and decades of energy to spit out a faint red gas. At the risk of internal injury, his figure shot up almost 10 feet into the air despite not having a platform to propel himself up. After landing unsteadily on a tree as though he had avoided this calamity, a powerful sword chi came roaring towards him from above. The powerful gust of wind brought about by the sword chi made his whole body turn cold. An expert, a powerful expert. Dangerous, extremely dangerous. Mingver Yuoyun did not have the chance to even catch his breath. He hurriedly jumped off the tree and before he found a place to land, he could already feel the cold sword blade touching his skin. Exhausting even more energy, Mingver Yuoyun avoided the attack and jumped sideways 3 times. However, the ambushing expert did not let go of him and followed closely behind him like a venomous snake. Mingver Yuoyun, who was one of the 3 great experts in above heavens, was actually chased to the point he did not even have a chance to turn around. With an enraged roar, Mingver Yuoyun's figure shot forward like an arrow and he was finally able to get away from his opponent's bone-piercing energy. However, Mingver Yuoyun still did not have the time to catch his breath. The first thing he did was to turn around and spit out a mouthful of blood which had a semi-liquid gaseous substance mixed within it. In order to get away from his opponent's pursuit, Mingver Yuoyun had already burned his life essence and despite looking as though he was alright on the surface, his internal organs were already heavily injured and he would not be able to fight for long. The semi-liquid red substance was completely different from the faint red gas previously. While the latter harmed his vitality, as long as he nursed his vitality back carefully with the aid of spiritual herbs, he would be able to recover fully. However, the semi-liquid red substance was Mingver Yuoyun's life essence. The moment it was expended, he would never be able to recover it. Furthermore, it was extremely harmful to his body and even if he nursed his health back, at least 3 years of his life would be lost. Who would have thought that an ambush would force a top-notch expert to such dire straits? Before he could even see who his enemy was, he had already suffered life-threatening injuries. However, Mingver Yuoyun had no choice but to make that choice. From the very first attack of his opponent, Mingver Yuoyun knew that his opponent was a top-notch assassin in the world. When facing such an opponent, if Mingver Yuoyun was unable to turn the situation around and kept his back facing the opponent, he would be asking for death. Losing a few years of his life was better than dying on the spot. Even though his vitality was harmed and innards injured, he still had some confidence when facing the opponent head-on. At the very least he would be able to retaliate and not just escape for his life. However, what was completely out of Mingver Yuoyun's expectations was that the top-notch assassin in front of him was actually a 16 to 17-year-old teen. His cold face and frosty gaze coupled with a gleaming long sword in his hand. If not for the dense killing intent being emanated from this teen, Ming Yuoyun would have thought that he was dreaming. How could a young teen who had not even grown hair yet actually force him to such a state? How was this possible? The black-robed teen did not say a thing as his body drifted up and charged at Ming Yuoyun without restraint. At the same time, the black-robed teen brandished his sword and his sword shot forward like a venomous viper. Kill! At this moment, a loud roar sounded, shaking the leaves off the trees. Kill! Following that, hundreds of people echoed back and killing intent burst forward like a tsunami. Rows of black-robed men dashed out from the shadows and pounced towards the allied forces of above heavens and the Zhao family. Countless blades glowed under the moonlight and a small river of blood was formed. The 200 to 300 people who had barely got into the trees were immediately slashed back down. In just the blink of an eye, Ming Yuoyun had already exchanged tens of moves with the black-robed man. The teen was extremely experienced in battle and every move of his was vicious. The exquisiteness of his swordplay was also far out of Ming Yuoyun's expectations. Even if it was only tens of moves, Ming Yuoyun no longer dared to underestimate the enemy and treated his opponent as an equal. Amid this business, he looked down at the battlefield and was devastated. The black-robed men of unknown origins were all martial arts experts and every attack of theirs was extremely vicious. Facing his brothers who completely did not have the ability to retaliate, the black-robed men fought valiantly with every strike of theirs aiming to kill. In just a couple of breaths, the densely cluttered forest was much more spacious than before and the number of corpses on the forest floor became more and more. Ming Yuoyun could not take it any longer and let out a loud roar. Exhausting even more vitality, he launched a couple of attacks to frantically force back the black-robed teen in front of him. Ming Yuoyun's face had already turned completely pale. Making a backflip in the air, he landed on the ground and roared, "Everyone listen up, follow this old man and kill a path out." He then raised his sword and charged down like a frenzied tiger. If he couldn't create a path of escape for his men, all of his more than 3,000 men would perish in this forest. Since he brought them out, he must bring them back. Even if he had to die, he would have no hesitations. Ming Yuoyun was putting his life on the line. The rear of the troops suddenly broke out into chaos and a human figure stormed through them like a ferocious dragon. Everywhere he went, a rain of blood would follow and he was like a gigantic ship breaking the still surface of the waters. Following his advance, the men to his left and right collapsed onto the ground and became a sea of corpses. All of their throats were spewing out blood and they were completely unable to hinder the maniacal advancement of that human figure. Behind him, there were only corpses. There weren't any survivors, nor were there any just injured. Just this person alone was like a corpse-creating machine and he had truly killed a bloody path. With a single glance, Ming Yuoyun knew that he definitely wasn't a match for that human figure. Not to mention the current him who was heavily injured, even in his prime he wouldn't be a match for this person. Thus, he turned around and charged away. The young assassin behind him seemed to have disappeared and the path behind him was empty already. Ming Yuoyun was elated in his heart. With the few men around him, he tried to break out of the encirclement and gather the other forces towards the depths of the forest. Since their exit was blocked, he could only charge forward. Even if what lay in front of him was an unknown mountain of blades, this was the only road left for them. Along the way, more and more above heaven's expert joined him on the ground. Everyone knew that this direction was the only path of survival for them. After a short 10 minutes of killing, less than 800 men were able to follow Ming Yuoyun to charge out. On top of that, most of them had injuries. Almost 80% of their troops were defeated in this short period of time. Ming Yuoyun's heart turned cold. He no longer had the time to think about the cause of this tragedy and where the slip-up occurred. The only thought he had now was to charge out with all of his remaining men. They would only be able to find a shred of survival if they could charge out of this dense forest. However, it would only be a shred of survival. But when they were charging out, the black-robed experts only put up a half-hearted fight before allowing them to easily charge out. This is far too strange. There is definitely a more frightening ambush ahead. This odd reaction allowed Ming Yuoyun to make the above conclusion. But despite knowing that, Ming Yuoyun had no choice but to make his final struggle because what lay ahead was his only hope for survival. All of Ming Yuoyun's thoughts were finally interrupted by an incoming bolt of lightning. That familiar green ray made Ming Yuoyun gasp out in extreme fear before his death. Heaven splitter! Right after these words left his mouth, Ming Yuoyun was hacked into two parts, a clean slice through the middle from the head to his toes. Ming Ryuoyun, one of the three top-notch experts of above heavens and the younger brother of the martial fanatic Meng Ryuozu, was cleaved in two by the heaven splitter before being able to display his strength. He did not even have the time to retaliate or react. Spinning around like a top, the heaven splitter swept out laterally and a green ray swept past the surroundings. Within a 30-feet radius, all of Ling Tian's enemies were sliced in two. While some were sliced at the waist and others the back or shoulders, their deaths were equally miserable. The ground was covered in corpses with their eyes dilated in shock. Their forward momentum was immediately halted. Extreme fear could be seen in all of their eyes. Ling Tian drifted backward before ordering calmly, "Kill them all. Leave no one alive." The calmness of his voice was as though he was a nobleman ordering his servants to clean up the mansion. Chapter 571 Inner Thoughts of an Assassin. Ling Tian and Kai moved simultaneously, both of their swords cleaving open the blood rain that filled the sky. This was closely followed by Feng Mo, who brought numerous warriors as they violently shouted out, engaging into the fray once more. For the enemies who already had their courage stolen, they were akin to a bunch of lambs, bleating out their final wails. They had already lost all thoughts of resistance. It was akin to a tsunami sweeping across the remnant enemies. On the ground, other than Ling Tian's forces, there was no other living being. A complete wipeout. On the other side, Ling Tian pointed at Ling Kai as he spoke, "Go over to where the battle started. There are still a lot of wounded on the ground. Finish them off with a stab. Make sure that there are none left alive." A broken bar, a broken bar. The winds of autumn screamed around Ling Tian while he and his horse stood at the mountain pass, his hands clutching a falcon's messenger tube. From his vantage point, he could see the war flags of the Zhao family from afar. His face remained indifferent, as though wishing to see how the Zhao family would live up to their fantasies of charging into sky-bearing empire like a hot knife through butter. Behind him stood row after row of knights, their rough and weathered expressions giving off a sense of sturdiness as well as unconcealed battle intent. Farther back, in a pool of blood, lay more than 10 bodies cut in two. Those were the original leaders of the soldiers stationed here. After successfully resolving the problem with the Zhao family's elite troops, Ling Tian's first action was to continuously slaughter his way until he reached this particular location. The mountain pass defense of a country. Who dared to look down on it? Since they knew the existence of a traitor, then eliminating the dissident would be the natural course of action to take. In regards to dealing with them, he was even impatient about it, creating a whirlwind of blood the moment he arrived. In just minutes the leaders of the Wang family had already been mercilessly purged by him. Feng Mo, send out 2 people to return to the Ling family courtyard at the fastest speed and relay my command. The imperial tutor of the dynasty, Wang Zihong, has betrayed the country. This is an unpardonable crime, and all his family members are to be beheaded without a single one remaining. All those related to the Wang family, be they officials or generals, are all to cease their current roles and be captured to await judgment in sky-bearing. Any who resist will be killed without mercy. As for the vacated roles, the Ling family courtyard will deploy a substitute within 1 day at the latest without fail. Ling Tian's mouth and hand moved non-stop, as he speedily also wrote a letter for Feng Mo to pass on. Understood. Feng Mo's huge face remained impassive and he signaled to his men to take the notice. Both of them received the command, flipping up onto their horses and disappearing in a cloud of dust. Ling Tian gazed at the huge military camp of the Zhao family, a thought of annihilating every last one of them surfacing inside his mind. Only when you truly saw the elite bearings of the Zhao family troops, the rigor of Zhao Fengyang in training his soldiers, that you would understand that they surpassed whatever reputation they had. Even at such a far distance, one would coldly shiver at the solemn majesty of the army. One could imagine what sort of force they would be during a battle. Young noble, since in reality the Zhao family is already in control of this area, why don't they occupy it, but rather stand there and guard the area instead of going on the offensive? Isn't that a waste of manpower? If they really brought all their armies in to occupy this area, I'm afraid it wouldn't be as easy for us to take it back. Feng Mo walked up 2 steps, staring warily at the scene opposite him as he spoke his thoughts. Even though the Zhao family has unrivaled financial power, Money should never be wasted like this. This subordinate cannot even predict their thoughts as it doesn't go with logic and common sense. Feng Mo was originally under the command of Ling Tian and was someone who had been through many wars. Of course, he had a certain understanding towards military and war strategy. However, even so, this was what boosted his suspicions in his heart about the Zhao family's performance. Waste? Where is this a waste? How is this a waste? Ling Tian coldly smiled in return. The current Zhao family's actions are more than treacherous. Stationing their soldiers here, yet not moving forward, what country would not be worried about a 200,000 strong army staring covetously at you? This is as good as them choking our necks, making us uncomfortable. Right now, Shen Ruhu in the east is tied up, not daring to move, and my father in the south also doesn't dare to shift his armies for fear that the situation will collapse. Thus, the Zhao army here actually has sufficient place to showcase their abilities, and since the so-called impregnable fortress was actually filled with their men, it would be a piece of cake to enter. However, they do not do so, for it will remove all their advantages. The moment they move, they will suffer the greatest losses as well. Other than revealing the truth about their spies, they would also induce us to gather our elites to wipe out all their spies in the shortest time. Furthermore, this would also allow Eastern Zhao and Southern Jing to look for opportunities to exploit. After all, this would allow them to expel the thorn in their bosom. Since they can threaten us without moving, then naturally they would be unwilling to destroy this balance. A war without guarantees would only give their enemies an opportunity. In addition, they still have a huge army southeast of here waiting for us. Thus, they have to maintain this deadlocked position, consuming vast amounts of resources on the backlines. With the wealth of the Zhao family, I believe they will not pay much attention to it. However, for us at Sky Bearing, who are besieged on three sides, we have to be worried. Southern Jing is furthermore pincered to both ends, possibly entering a state of annihilation at any given moment. As such, there will be a family that cannot take the pressure any longer and will initiate the war. Whichever family it is, it will definitely not be the Zhao family. As the war grows and the casualties mount, there will come a day where one side can't hold on any longer, and it will be this time when the Zhao family swoops in. Ling Tian coldly laughed. The scheme of the Zhao family can be said to be beautifully planned, using hundreds of years of amassed resources to achieve the ultimate victory in the battlefield. This is their objective. Such a scheme is brilliant and furthermore feasible. And this plan, when compared against the rest of the world, is unfeasible because of the huge amount of resources required. Not even the Ling family could afford it. As such, war is about who's wealthier. If you have enough wealth, enough power, then you would have won half the battle. In addition, even with such overwhelming odds of success, they still chose to launch such a contradictory method of a sneak attack. No matter from what viewpoint, we can see that their plans were deliberately and methodically laid out. To the point of ensuring not a single loss while enjoying the best piece of meat, they're really dreaming to the point they blur fantasy with reality. But a broken bar. Since young noble knows about all this, then why don't show a broken bar? Feng Mo wanted to ask. Why did Ling Tian still choose to deploy his soldiers? Was this not creating a chance for the enemy? However, he realized that it was out of his authority to question, and immediately clamped his mouth shut. But Ling Tian laughed in a depressed manner. Bore. Ling Tian coldly looked at Feng Mo, as he softly spat. You a broken bar, you dumb FK. Feng Mo looked utterly discomfited. His hair bristled up as he shivered in anger. In the Ling family courtyard, other than a select few, everyone was afraid of Ling Tian. But it just so happened that one of the exceptions was Feng Mo. Thinking about the time in the past, this little kid couldn't even keep up with them during their practices. Who knew that in a few years he would become an earth-shaking killer? However, one point did not change, and that was his deadpan expression that was still as stone-cold as ever. Inside the Ling family courtyard, Feng Mo was the oldest blood iron warrior leader present, and one of the few who wasn't scared of Ling Tian at all. However, he conveniently did not dare to mention the fact that he used to call him with the nickname of Little Jian in the past. You a broken bar, you dumb FK. As such, while he actually wanted to call him a little lowly thing, he, in the end, could not bear to say it. Ling Tian's body had started to exude cold killing intent, and even if the hardened veteran that was Feng Mo, he could not bear too much. You're the pig, Ling Tian replied without any sense of courtesy. Why, Are you unsatisfied? You followed the young noble for close to a decade now from when he was a kid. When have you discovered a situation that would strangle the throat of young noble? You really possess the brain of a pig. Other than wasting resources, you're good for nothing. Are you any better? You brainless murderer, other than pretending to be a corpse the whole day and killing people, what else can you do? Whenever I see this dead face, I feel like puking. It's not like you understand the plans of our young noble. So on what grounds are you insulting me? Feng Mo spat back. I admit that I don't know, but I don't need to know either. I just need to be able to carry out the young noble's actions. I'm unlike some others, who don't know and yet pretend that they understand. Spewing out nonsense, broken bar. Ling Tian continued his tirade. That's enough. Ling Tian pinched his brows. Every time you two meet you always quarrel. Even after placing you two in the Ling family courtyard to oppose each other day and night, you two still haven't had enough? This place is the battlefield, not your own backyard where you can argue freely. Feng Mo chuckled in embarrassment before using a reminiscing voice as he said, young noble, you might not know it but I, old Feng, especially cherish those memories from a decade ago. At that time, the moment I did not see eye to eye with a certain someone, I would just need to grab his leg, pull down his pants and give him a good spanking. That sort, that crispness, that touch, really brings back fond memories. Now that the certain someone is old, he thinks he can bully me. Sigh, the time has gone by so fast. Ling Tian's face turned pale, and he glared at him. In the entire courtyard, those who could have said to have beat Ling Tian were practically nil. But this old Feng just happened to always be an exception. Even without the little Jian nickname, there was still a lot of dirty linen he could bring up. Ling Tian couldn't help but smile, looking at Ling Tian with interest as he pretended to ponder. Little Jian's buttocks have also been smacked by me. At that time, the feeling was really quite splendid. Even now I still think about it now and then. The crisp sound boasts of so much appeal akin to what Confucius spoke about going 3 months without meat, that kind of feeling. Ling Tian stopped talking about the battlefield as though he decided that the Ling family courtyard was now in this place. Ling Tian had a deep scowl on his face. The reason why Ling Tian worked in tandem with Feng Mo wasn't just to purely poke fun at him, but also because he found out that Ling Tian had become colder and more eccentric after his battle with Li Zhu. Other than talking with Ling Tian, Ling Chen and a few others, he put on a cold expression to everyone else and frequently sat in a corner with his sword, ignoring everyone. His sword had become quicker, his moves more ruthless. If one were to talk about just becoming a peerless killer, it might not be a bad thing, but to be a good brother, then it definitely wouldn't be good. Ling Tian always had this worry that if Ling Tian was to continue developing down this line, he would enter the path of a true cold-blooded sword murderer. When that time came, while his skills might take a quantitative and qualitative leap, he would also fully turn into a slaughterer without any emotions whatsoever. While this would provide more help for Ling Tian would end up being alone for the rest of his life, destined to only be a tool to be used for killing. Ling Tian aspired for Ling Tian to be a killer with emotions and feelings, to become a true brother which would share weal and woe, not a simple treasured sword meant to kill. Ling Tian was willing to see Ling Tian progress at a slower pace, progressively stepping up towards the peak of martial arts, rather than to see him use this sort of extreme method to ruin himself. Thus, upon seeing this rare chance where Ling Tian spoke so much, Ling Tian took the chance to work together with Old Feng to poke fun at him. Ling Tian's words made many of the Blood Iron warriors recount the past, and as they looked at Ling Tian, they seemed to see that strict and severe little child of yesteryear. Everyone felt a stirring in their hearts, and crowded around Ling Tian, smiling and teasing him. Walking into the circle, Ling Tian warmly stared at the red-faced Ling Tian as he gently said, "Tian, you're already 19. Right? Do you have any lady in your heart that you fancy? Just look at our Ling Kai, he's almost at the home run stage now, but you as the big brother, how could you be behind him?" Ling Tian did not expect the latter to suddenly bring out this question and could only hang his head down on embarrassment. It was only after a long time did he finally speak. "Young noble, stop teasing Ling Tian. I've never considered this matter at all. To tell you the truth, young noble, I only need to have the sword in my hand to feel at ease. As for familial matters, I've never truly thought about it, I just wished to protect young noble for all my life. Ling Tian laughed. Jian, please don't, your young noble here only likes ladies, and have no interest towards handsome guys. Please don't say you're going to accompany me for my whole life. Ling Jian's eyes shone, and his tone was unnaturally grave. Young noble should understand my meaning. Ling Jian has no regrets in this life. Ling Tian kept his smiling face, slowly breathing out as he heavily replied, I thought so. In actual fact, when I left Skybearing, I could see that you had always followed what I said to you that year. To take yourself as a sword that belongs to only me. Isn't that so? If so, what do you actually think inside your heart? Ling Jian smiled thinly, and the expression on his face originally settled down as he replied, not entirely so, of course. Young noble has an ambition to surpass the heavens, as well as the ability to do so. In that case, Ling Jian is willing to be the sword that helps young noble to surpass the heavens, and this is also my lifetime's dream. However, in my many years of killing, I've immersed myself more and more in this feeling of grasping everyone's lives in my hands. With only the sword in my hands, with blood on the sword, will I then feel happy and will I then feel truly alive? He took 2 steps forward, gazing on the void in the distance as an expression of solitude appeared on his face. Ever since my family was wiped out, I've already lost my sense of direction. When I was at my lowest, you picked me up, gave me the strength to take my revenge. During that period of time, no matter how difficult it was, I held on so as not to betray your hopes and expectations of me and also to personally kill all my enemies. I did not dare to slack off one bit. However, the very instant where I reaped the lives of all 300 of my enemies, I suddenly felt a mysterious void, but strangely, a strange satisfaction within that sense of emptiness in my heart. Ling Jian bitterly smiled. It was as though, from the very beginning, I was thirsting to reap the lives of others. Seeing my sword let out a radiant shine from all the blood coated on it, I truly felt alive, and with all my enemies dead, I was happy. I was inspired. This made me anticipate my next killing. However, with each killing, after that momentarily rush of happiness, I could also feel my own heart getting colder. However, I never truly thought of wanting to change anything. Ling Jian turned his head around to look at Ling Tian. In his eyes was a burning passion. Others might follow their young nobles for honor and glory, or perhaps for a high post and generous salary. Some even follow to be written down in history's annals. However, I, Ling Jian, follow my young noble only because I want to help my young noble settle some of his burdens. To purge all obstacles from my young noble, this and nothing more. Since young noble wishes to surpass the heavens, then killing cannot be avoided. Even without Ling Jian here, there will still be others who will step up to do such a matter rather than having yourself to do it. I have nothing to repay young noble with, so let me shoulder this crime of killing on my own. Let me shoulder this crime of killing on my own. Hearing this, Ling Tian was silent for a long time. In the end, he could only lightly sigh as he faced Ling Jian, saying, Jian, if not for me asking you, you would probably not say it even in your grave, right? Ling Jian lowered his head and did not answer. The autumn wind blew up his hair and robes, creating a rustling sound. At this moment, he seemed to have integrated into the cold wind, symbolizing desolation and solitude. This was the first time since Ling Jian followed Ling Tian that he did not answer Ling Tian immediately. I remember telling you that day that I needed a sword that could cut through all my obstacles, kill all those who obstruct me. Ling Tian finally breathed out. However, what happens after I conquer the entire world? Jian, to unite all under heavens, one needs a sword, one needs to kill. But in the end, there is a limit to killing, and we cannot continue like this forever. There will be one day where peace reigns and our time of slaughter will also have passed. We still have so many years ahead of us, and even if there are still wars and slaughter, that would be for the future generations to worry about, not us. Other than a sword, do you know what I lack the most right now, Jian? Ling Jian suddenly raised his head up. Ling Tian shook his head as he bitterly laughed. Ling Tian, can also be considered as a hegemon with authority and influence. With a wave of my hand, I can create rivers of blood that flow from 10,000 people. As for my confidant, I have Ling Chen, Bing Yan, and Yan Zhu, all who are heaven-toppling beauties. For a family, my parents and grandparents are healthy and well, without ailment, and they treasure me dearly. Having reached this state, to the ordinary person, I'm practically flawless. Is that so? I'm still missing something, and this something is similar to those I've stated above, that you cannot buy with money. Jian, do you know what I'm lacking? Ling Tian warmly looked at Ling Jian. Are you willing to give me the thing? So long as Ling Jian has it, he will definitely provide it for young noble. Without hesitation, Ling Jian resolutely replied. Good. A gentleman never goes back on his word. Ling Tian lightly shouted. His eyes narrowed as he smiled. I'm still lacking a brother, a true brother who will go through heaven and hell for me. I lack a brother who is willing to forge bonds of brotherhood with me. I lack a brother who is willing to boast and talk crap with me during our free time, to share weal and woe. Such a brother cannot be replaced by any woman on earth. How is it? Didn't you say you would want to accompany me for a lifetime? I now ask you to accompany me, to chat, and to boast. Ling Jian's face turned green. Young noble, it's alright if you ask me to kill and to plunder. However, to chit-chat and boast a broken bar I don't know how? Ling Tian smiled as he looked at him. This is something every male is inborn with. How could you not know this? I'm very expectant of your reply, just like how you decisively replied me that year, to be my sword. Without waiting for Ling Jian to open his mouth, he suddenly laughed and continued, I'll take your silence as consent then. When we return to Skybearing, I'll send out a command, giving you a matchmaking session. Matchmaking? Ling Jian was stunned silly. He was still absorbing what Ling Tian had said and did not fully understand the contents. What was it about a man being innately able to chit-chat and boast, and suddenly having this bombshell dropped on him? He could not help but exclaim out loud. Yep, matchmaking. You're already 19 and you're not of a young age anymore. You should have thoughts of forming a family. If you continue like this, I'm afraid you'll really become a cold-blooded sword. Ling Tian chuckled. And a woman is the best weapon to allow 100 times forged steel to become soft and supple. Ling Jian began to sweat buckets, sweat out a waterfall, a broken bar. Matchmaking? Even announcing to the entire world? Ling Jian might be cold and unfeeling, but apparently, even a corpse could change its expression. Young nobly broken bar this. I can't do it a broken bar. What can't? Why can't you? Ling Tian rolled his eyes as he rejected. Just look at me, I have 3 to 4 wives already, and they can even form a clique. You're still a bachelor, so don't you feel envious? Ling Jian did not know whether to laugh or cry as he replied, Young noble, I'm not jealous a broken bar. I've never thought of such a matter before. Besides, I also do not wish to be burdened by family matters. Never thought of it? No. This will not do. From now on I want you to think about it. I don't wish to have a bachelor on my side forever. They will not give me a sense of security. Ling Tian tyrannically growled. Jian, I might need you to kill for me, but I need you to be a normal person even more for me. Let's not talk about others. Do you wish to let your family bloodline end in your generation? Ling Tian fell silent. There existed an ancient saying, there are 3 ways to be unfilial, of which not having descendants is the worst. Especially since Ling Jian's family only had him left, the duty was even heavier. Ling Yuan mentioning his point was to drive him into his grave. In this particular era, to bear offspring was something everyone deemed a necessity. Ling Tian laughed to himself as he stopped speaking. He did not need to continue. Ling Jian was a smart person, and saying too much it would instead produce a negative effect. So long as he continued thinking down this line, he would naturally come to his senses. Instead, if he was thoroughly cornered, then he would instead reveal his stupidly loyal persona. Feng Mo took this opportune time to say, Young noble, since little Jian scolded me for not having a brain, could you enlighten me and explain your plans? Ling Tian smiled as he spoke. Actually, to break the scheme of the Zhao family, it's simpler than one thinks. Just like the theory in martial arts, where the strongest part of a skill could actually also be its flaw, the most clever part of the Zhao family's scheme is where its crucial point lies. Ling Jian and Feng Mo immediately caught on. Young noble is saying that within this entire setup, the Zhao family could have easily obtained what they wanted, yet they kept themselves hidden behind an intricate setup. However, if this perfect setup were to be countered, then it would completely offset all their plans? That's right, Jian. Look at the opposite. Can you think of a method that will drive the 200,000 strong army to retreat, and even vanish? Young noble, how about I'll bring the brothers down and charge for it? Trample them to bits. With our current strength, even if we don't succeed, to retreat without losses is not a problem. Ling Tian narrowed his eyes, eager to try it out. Recalling the time when he charged together with Ling Tian into the 400,000 strong army, that arrogance, that power, made his blood boil. Right now, the 200,000 strong army seemed a little small in comparison. Trample, retreat safely. Ling Tian stared with wide eyes at Ling Jian, as he suddenly laughed. My dear Jian, you can really fantasize. This is a 200,000 strong army that has pitched camp for a few days. How are you going to rush them? I believe, even heavenly justice would not be able to retreat even if you were to rush them right now. With just your skills, you are merely seeking death. The last time we rushed an army of 400,000 troops, yet we ended up fine. Ling Jian grumbled, a little miffed. That was then, this is now. The last time, both parties were on a foreign battlefield, without preparation or traps, and we chose the most chaotic time when the armies clashed to rush in, thus we had an advantage. Ling Tian solemnly replied. However, the Zhao family has already pitched camp for over 10 days. How would they not take precautions against ambushes? Let's not speak of 200,000 people, even a company of 2,000 men who have pitched camp and dug their heels into the ground would be hard to overcome. Even if we can't rush in, to blend in and set their items on fire is still possible, right? Ling Jian pursed up his lips, coolly looking at the opposite armed forces. Setting fiery broken bar is indeed a good idea. Ling Tian's eyes lit up, and he commanded, let's go, we'll look for the nearby bandits to say hi to. Chapter 572, Both Sides Rendezvous. As Ling Jian heard those words, he couldn't help but chuckle. Alright, I can say for sure that even if that brat doesn't pee his pants after seeing me, his legs will definitely turn to jelly. Haha, a broken bar. Ling Tian burst out laughing. You truly tortured Ling 17 badly back then. No wonder this fellow is like a mouse seeing a cat whenever he meets you. There was once when Ling 17 had diarrhea and you insisted that he had to train his swordplay. However, he couldn't hold it in and wanted to relieve himself, but you refused to let him and forced him to hold it in for a full day. In the end, his whole pants were soiled and Ling Kai and the rest gave him the nickname A Yellow Gold. Am I right? Mentioning this event, Ling Jian also laughed happily. Yep, it is this brat indeed. This nickname of his is still in use and is just like Ling Kai's A Dog Egg. Whenever someone mentions it he will definitely erupt in anger, and even I don't dare to mention it. Ha ha, you still say that you do not know how to brag? Aren't you bragging beautifully? Let's go. If we go late, this brat may start his operation and we wouldn't be able to watch a good show. Ling Tian called out and the 400 elites sprinted away leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Ling Tian originally brought 500 men, but after the previous battle, he lost about 40 to 50 men despite having the absolute advantage and initiative. Besides that, Ling Tian left another 20 men behind to guard the mountain pass and he was left with 400 men. Despite there being only 400 men left, even if they were to face an army with a couple of thousand soldiers they may not necessarily be on the losing end. All of these soldiers were the elites of the elites. Of the 400 present, 60 were trained by Ling Jian to be backup assassins of the first pavilion and 25 used to be blood iron warriors. The rest of them were the absolute elites chosen from the tens of thousands of soldiers in the courtyard and their battle prowess was not to be underestimated either. Ling Tian led his burly and ruffian-like subordinates silently past the mountain and went deep behind the Zhao family's army. A broken bar. The Zhao family tent. The Grand Marshal of the Zhao family, Zhao Fingyang, was seated in the military tent while holding on to an ancient-looking book and reading it attentively. He had the demeanor of a wise sage reading a book in spring, solemn and dignified while flipping through the pages with a twinkle of wisdom in his eyes. At this moment, Second Master Zhao was definitely not as calm as he looked and he was worried because of a single thing. Money. They had already set off for 20 days, and the amount of money that they had spent during this period could only be described as astronomical. Despite the amount of money being an astronomical sum, the Zhao family could definitely afford to drag out the battle. The name of being the #1 financial magnate was not a lie. If they were to fight a war of wealth, the Zhao family was confident that no one would be a match for them. The wealth that they had accumulated over 1,000 years was not to be underestimated. Even the Yu or Shui families wouldn't be a match for the Zhao family in terms of wealth. This is something which the Zhao family had always been extremely confident about. According to reliable information, Southern Jing was already in dire straits after making preparations for war. While not a single soldier had been lost, Southern Jing's finances were incapable of enduring such a large consumption of resources. With both the Ling and Zhao families sending out their troops to Southern Jing at the same time but not taking action, the civilians of Southern Jing were becoming anxious and were on the verge of collapse. The only thing that was lacking was a trigger point to incite chaos. The Ling family was openly ambitious and everyone was aware of their ambitions, but the Zhao family was two-faced, obviously with the intention to kill two birds with one stone. Currently, Southern Jing had exhausted a large amount of resources and was already in a precarious situation. At the same time, it was also a large meat pie that was placed in the middle of the two families' troops, with both the families eyeing it covetously. Everyone knew that this meat pie no longer belonged to Southern Jing, but the final ownership of the pie was still undetermined. It was this feeling of knowing that their deaths were inevitable but yet they had no choice but to await their deaths that made one feel hopelessness and craziness. The only problem for the Zhao family now was the fact that the Ling family's resources could still hold up. Furthermore, the news that Zhao Fengyang had received and analyzed had shockingly revealed that the Ling family did not look like they were struggling at all. This was something that made Zhao Fengyang extremely puzzled and was also the reason for him to speed up the execution of his plan. Since when did the Ling family's wealth become so formidable, holding up 3 fronts of battle but looking as though they were still at ease? During this period of time, even with the Zhao family's immense wealth, even if they were able to endure the drain of resources, it definitely wasn't an easy task for them. What was the Ling family relying on? In the near future, the Ling family will definitely be my Zhao family's greatest enemy. The threat that they pose to us will probably be even greater than the Yu family. Zhao Fengyang placed the book in his hands down and let out a long sigh of regret. Big brother, not swallowing up the Ling family a decade ago is probably the biggest mistake of our Zhao family. Reporting to Second Master. Everything has been prepared and we are awaiting your orders. A general clad in black armor walked into the tent and reported respectfully. You may take your leave. The arranged time is 2 hours later and our army will set off at that time. We must attract the attention of the whole continent to us. Zhao Fengyang nodded his head calmly. Today was the time limit that he agreed on with Mingver Yuoyun and Mingver Yuoyun, who should already be in Skybearing by now. As long as his army sets off at the agreed time, Mingver Yuoyun would launch his attack 4 hours later. Mingver Yuoyun would first attack the slightly weaker Ling residents before attacking the Ling family courtyard. They must take down these 2 establishments that house the upper echelons of the Ling family. The Ling family would then be facing internal and external struggle and would not be able to make a comeback after this. As he went over the plan in his heart, Zhao Fengyang felt that there was a 70% chance for the plan to succeed. The moment that the Ling family was wiped out, Southern Jing would be within their reach. Furthermore, Eastern Zhao is also in a period of internal struggle with the new Dongfang family head, Dongfang Jinglei, staging a rebellion. Currently, both parties were engaged in an intense battle, and with their strengths being similar, both parties would end up being heavily injured. After they take care of matters here, half of the continent would fall into the Zhao family's hands with the fall of the Ling family. If not for this huge goal of theirs, why would Zhao Fengyang send out more than 400,000 troops? In the world today, was there really an enemy worthy of the Zhao family sending out all of their forces? Even the Yu family did not have such rights, just to deal with the Ling family. Ha ha, what a joke. After sending out this order, Zhao Fengyang stood up and looked towards the mountains in the distance as though he was facing his nemesis. Yu Manlu, the time for both our families to fight over the world will come soon. Do you know that I have been waiting for this battle for a very long time? It is time for us to see who is the #1 military commander. At this moment, Feng Yang's gaze was filled with the loneliness of someone standing at the peak. Ever since he started leading his troops into battle for the first time, he had always emerged victorious in every battle and there was nothing capable of stopping him. After experiencing victory after victory, Feng Yang felt a sense of loneliness. At the same time, he also looked forward to having a face-off with the other military commander who had no records of loss, Yu Manlu. No other individual was able to enter the sights of this second master. 1,000 victories were easy but a single defeat was difficult. Imagining the scene of him facing Yu Manlu in the battlefield and battling it out with their wits, Feng Yang's eyes turned damp and he felt his blood boil. If he was truly able to face Yu Manlu in battle, it would be the dream of a hot-blooded general and he wouldn't have any regrets for the rest of his life. A broken bar. The horns sounded. Feng Yang's eyes glowed and outside the tent, orderly marching could be heard all across the camp. Apart from the neighing war horses and shouts of the commanders, not another sound could be heard in the camp. The army was about to set off. Such disciplined troops that were as tough as steel, who else other than Feng Yang, would be able to train them? A broken bar, a broken bar. Ling 17 scampered around anxiously. Ever since the Zhao family began their operation, he had surveyed the mountains carefully to find any possible geographical element that he could exploit, such as the terrain, water source, etc. However, it was a pity that the Zhao family's commander truly lived up to the reputation of being the #1 strategist in the Zhao family. The arrangements that he had made along the way were truly without a flaw for others to take advantage of. This made the stubble on Ling 17's chin become even denser. In just a few days' time, the short stubble became even longer and he no longer looked like a 17-year-old teen. Ever since he received the orders from Ling Chen to destroy the Zhao family's food resupply route at all costs, Ling 17 had truly gone crazy. Ling 17 himself also wanted to destroy the resupply route at all costs, sacrificing his own life together with his more than 1,000 brothers. However, the problem was that after a few days of investigation, there was no weakness in the food resupply route for him to exploit. It was an easy thing to sacrifice himself, but even if he wanted to sacrifice himself, he must sacrifice himself meaningfully. If he were to sacrifice all of his 1,000 brothers without accomplishing anything, it would only be a pointless sacrifice. Even if he were to die, he must die at the appropriate moment and use the final moment of his life to give the enemy a heavy blow. Even if he had the heart to fight with his life on the line, it was completely meaningless. Even if he were to sacrifice all of his 1,000 brothers, he would not be able to even delay the Zhao family's resupply route. Seeing the Zhao family's carriages slowly passing by, Ling 17 truly wanted to let out a curse. Along the way, there was a lookout station every couple of miles and all the lookout stations faced each other so they would be able to aid each other. Despite there not being many people in each lookout station, all of these lookout stations were constructed on extremely open areas. It was extremely difficult to take out all the soldiers in the lookout station without alerting anyone. As long as a single lookout station broke out in battle, reinforcements would arrive swiftly and they might not even be able to escape. According to Ling 17's estimation, he would have to destroy at least 20 lookout stations and destroy the road in the middle before he would be able to complete the task given to him to delay the Zhao family's food supply for 3 days. However, he only had 1,200 subordinates and even though all of these subordinates were experts at robbery, when it came to destroying the road, they had no better ideas other than to set things on fire. Thus, they were all unable to find a solution. Regardless of the damage they dealt, the Zhao family would be able to fix it in half a day. Ling 17 was enraged. He had already lost his temper more than 100 times over the past 7 to 8 days. All of his subordinates avoided him like the plague, afraid that they would suffer a beating from their fuming leader. There were already a few who were carried away after being whipped by their leader Broken Bar. Ling 17 stood high up on the rocks and borrowing the cover of the trees he used his spyglass to study the enemy's movement beneath the mountain. The more he studied them, the angrier he got and he couldn't help but let out a series of curses. Although Ling 17 could see from his peripheral vision that his subordinates received someone who was walking towards him, the insensitive him did not think much about it until an extremely irritating mocking voice sounded a Broken Bar. "Yellow gold. What's wrong? Why is your face so red?" Hee hee, Look at how you are squatting on top the rock. You really look as though you are constipated. A broken bar, are you going to create yellow gold again? FK your grandmother. Ling 17, who had nowhere to vent his frustrations, exploded and he turned around with a blazing gaze, which darn beast streeted a broken bar before he could finish his words. His mouth hung wide open and his previously red face turned green. Then, his legs buckled and gave way as he crashed onto the ground as though he had seen a ghost. In front of him was his boss, the king of assassins, Ling Tian. As for the person standing by the side looking at him with a mischievous smile, it was a dog-egg Ling Kai who had just teased him. As such, the bandits who were watching from afar witnessed an unbelievable scene. Their leader crawled forward with tears welling up in his eyes before jumping up with ecstasy. Just when he was about to give the other party a big hug, he was mercilessly stomped onto the ground. Just when all of them were about to brandish their swords to take revenge for their boss was not frustrated or angry in the slightest. Instead, he crawled forward with a look of flattery as though he had not been stomped on a broken bar. Was this still their cold-blooded and uptight boss who would rather die than submit? All of their jaws dropped in complete incredulity. Are we dreaming? Their eyes were wide open and it was as though their eyeballs would drop out at any moment. A broken bar. Chapter 573 Crazy Decision. A broken bar. Yellow Gold's face turned red again. A broken bar. Ling Kai pointed at Ling 17 and laughed to the point his body trembled. You dog egg. A broken bar. Ling 17's face wasn't red at the start but turned red from what Ling Kai had said. He then glared at Ling Kai fiercely and waved his fists around. Yellow. A broken bar. 17, do you have some trouble? Ling Tian was too used to using Ling 17's nickname and had almost blurted it out without thinking. It isn't some trouble at all, but it is a huge trouble, Ling 17 said with a depressed look. I have never been afraid of death, but am afraid that my death wouldn't be sufficient to complete the young noble's mission. That would be horrible and extremely embarrassing. Oh, Ling Tian looked at Ling 17 with a smile which didn't seem like a smile. There isn't a need for you to rush. Young noble is here already. Let me tell him now that Ling 17 does not have the ability to complete this mission. I believe that the young noble will understand you for sure. Ling Tian's voice suddenly turned cold and he turned and walked away. Don't a broken bar. Don't a broken bar. Brother Jian, ancestor Jian. A broken bar. Ling 17's burly figure pounced forward and grabbed onto Ling Jian's calves and was dragged by Ling Jian along the ground for a short few feet. My dear ancestor, please don't play with me. I will a broken bar. Ling Tian sat on a smooth rock with a bunch of burly men seated opposite him respectfully. Speak, what kind of difficulties do you have? Ling Tian looked at the ape-like Ling 17 in front of him and could not help but be shocked. When he was in the courtyard, Ling 17 could already eat more than the others and had a larger build as compared to his peers. In just a short few years, Ling 17 had grown horizontally and currently looked like a rectangle. In a couple of years, who knows if he would turn into a square, especially his extremely boorish face and his needle-like beard. No one would ever be able to imagine that this boorish man who looked as though he was more than 30 years old was actually less than 18. Ling Tian almost suspected that Ling 17 had taken steroids. Young noble, this subordinate wants to launch an ambush to capture the surrounding 20 or so lookout stations before sending men to guard the ends of the two roads. The others will then dig up this segment of the road and Sister Chen's mission would be complete. Ling 17 scratched his hair and a handful of dandruff fell off as he said helplessly, it is a pity that we do not have enough manpower. Puchy. Ling 17 was greeted with a face full of water and never expected that his young noble would spit out his mouth full of water. Ling Tian had just received the gourd which Ling Kai offered him and drank a mouthful of water but was choked by the words that Ling 17 said. What did you say? Ambush more than 20 lookout stations? Guard the two ends of the road? Dig the road up? Ling Tian stood up and kicked Ling 17's burly shoulders with exasperation. Damn it! Without 5,000 soldiers at least, it would be impossible to attack more than 20 lookout stations at the same time. On top of that, if you want to guard the two ends of the road, you would need 50,000 soldiers at the very least, and even then, you guys may not be able to guard the road. As for digging the road up, While the idea isn't bought a broken bar, the road is filled with iron and rocks 2 feet underground. How do you plan to dig it up? You only have a mere 1,000 soldiers and you actually came up with such a huge plan? I really don't know if I should call you a genius or idiot. If I were to really go with your plan, I might as well bring all of our soldiers over to have a final battle with the Zhao family. What is the point of talking about disrupting their resupply route? To think that you really came up with such a plan. Hehe, a broken bar yellow gold is truly pig-headed. Ling Kai gloated by the side. After being sent trolling by Ling Tian, Ling 17 stood up foolishly with a few leaves stuck onto his bird nest-like hair. He then blinked his eyes with doubt and asked, a broken bar. Sister Chen was the one who said that a broken bar we need to destroy the resupply route. If we don't dig up the road, how should we destroy it? Haze. Ling Tian let out a long sigh and had the urge to bang his head on the rock. He was truly playing music to a bull. Pig. Do you really need to touch the road to destroy the resupply route? Ling Tian let out a flurry of fists, hating the fact that Ling 17 had truly thrown his face. Setting fire to burn it is destroying the resupply route. Killing them all is also destroying the resupply route. Damn it. Even if you guys infiltrate the Zhao residents to kill them all cleanly, it would still be destroying the resupply route. Do you understand? Ling 17 used one hand to cover his face and the other to guard his 2 important parts, implementing the battle philosophy which Ling Tian had taught him back then. Cover his face, hug his balls and allow the other party to punch and kick as they like. His body began shaking from left to right as he begged for mercy. Brother Giant, a broken bar. I will pick some soldiers to infiltrate the Zhao residents to kill a broken bar. FK. Ling Tian was completely speechless. The saying of a disciple truly takes after his master was truly right. Ling Tian's idea was truly completely rotten and wasn't any much better than Ling 17's plan of guarding the ends of the road and digging up the road. To think that he would have a look of righteousness on his face, scolding his subordinate for being a pig. In actual fact, he wasn't any much better than Ling 17. Kill everyone? If they really killed everyone, what was the point of destroying the resupply route? Wasn't this akin to taking off his pants to fart? A few 100,000 soldiers, even if they stood still and allowed you to kill them, you would require a few months to complete the task. Stop fooling around. All of you are a bunch of pig heads. Pot calling the kettle black. Ling Tian grunted. Show me the map of the surrounding area. It seems like I will still have to rely on myself. Ling Tian sighed helplessly. It was completely nonsensical to rely on a bandit and assassin to destroy a military resupply route. Just what was Minglij thinking about? You have to know, every occupation has a special broken bar. Seeing Ling Tian finally stopping his attack, Ling 17 carefully removed his hands from his head and crotch. To the thick-skinned Ling 17, this round of beating was truly nothing much. Turning around and seeing his subordinates look at him in a daze, he immediately flew into a rage. Didn't you guys hear that young noble wants the map? Aren't all of you BSTRDS going to fetch the map? A bunch of pig heads without any reaction. Are you guys going to wait for my whip to teach you guys a lesson? With a loud bang, the bandits scattered like the birds and hurriedly ran to fetch the map. A broken bar. Ling Tian frowned and let out a sigh. In order to fetch a map which was a mere few grams, more than 100 people were required to fetch a broken bar. Ling 17 turned around in embarrassment and scratched his head foolishly. Young noble, please don't be anxious. A broken bar, the children are going to fetch the map and it would arrive soon. Hehe, a broken bar. These fellows are a little slow. A broken bar, it isn't much. I only need to give them a good beating. A broken bar. Ling Tian looked at the bushy face in front of him and was speechless. At the same time, he felt his stomach churning in disgust before sighing and saying weakly, 17, I finally understand why you unloaded the yellow gold into your pants back then, and also completely understand Ling Tian's mood when training you. It isn't easy. Ling 17 was dumbfounded with his jaws down in shock. He completely could not understand how this matter was related to his embarrassing past. Besides that, what has this got to do with his boss Ling Tian? What wasn't easy for Ling Tian? Their young noble's words were truly deep and profound, and he was truly a well-learned individual. Feng Mo, Ling Tian, and Ling Kai looked at the dumbfounded Ling 17 and their faces contorted from holding in their laughter. The sound of footsteps broke Ling 17's doubt and snatched the map from the hands of his subordinate. He then turned around and presented the map with both his arms raised as though he was presenting a treasure to the king. "Young noble, the map is here." Sir Broken Bar in a moment of anxiousness. A large hole was torn in the fragile map and Ling Tian, who witnessed it, was about to blow up. Scram to the side. Ling Tian kicked Ling 17 in the ass and cursed. Ling 17 held onto his ass and stood by the side shamelessly. At the same time, he winked at Ling Kai. Dog egg, a Broken Bar. Ling Kai rolled his eyes and looked to the side. Facing a shameless person like Ling 17, Ling Kai was truly helpless. Of course, there also wasn't a need for him to flare up at Ling 17, as flaring up at Ling 17 was just a waste of effort. Even if you went completely bonkers from anger, Ling 17 wouldn't understand why you were angry. Ling Tian frowned and looked at the gigantic map carefully. After considering for a long time, he finally made up his mind and pointed to the map. "It shall be here." He then revealed a helpless smile. Ling Tian could clearly feel that there was a dense feeling of pity in Ling Tian's eyes, and he could not help but be stunned. Why would Ling Tian be acting in such a manner? Looking at where Ling Tian's finger was pointing at, Ling Tian saw a large lake on the map with a blue stream beneath it. Following along the stream, Ling Tian noticed that it was surrounded by two tall peaks by the side with a large road in the center. Following that, there was a sturdy-looking castle, and it was the #1 perilous location of the southeast, the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass. This was also the Zhao family's natural barrier towards invaders. After going through the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass, they would be greeted with 3,000 miles of fertile land, and that was where the true territory of the Zhao family was. It was also the reason why no other power was able to infiltrate into the Zhao family's territory for the past 500 years. Regardless of whether the Zhao family wanted to send out armies or the outside world wanted to invade them, it was necessary to pass through the Heavenly Water Ravine Passing, and there wasn't a second path. The mountains, which spanned across a couple of thousand miles, and the precipitously steep slopes that were high up in the clouds made it impossible for any army to surmount it. This Heavenly Water Ravine Pass was truly capable of blocking 10,000 soldiers with a single man. At this place, which only required 2,000 soldiers to defend steadily, the Zhao family actually sent a whole 10 battalions, 10,000 men. This was only counting the ordinary troops and did not include the various personal guards, cavalry and other various troops. If all of these were to be added in, there would be 20,000 soldiers at the very least. Regardless of how terribly the Zhao family loses on the outside, as long as they were able to protect this place, the 3,000 miles of territory behind it would always be theirs. Even if all of their soldiers on the outside perished, the Zhao family only needed a few decades of rest before they would be able to produce tens of thousands of soldiers again and rule the world. The grain of the Zhao family was sent out from this place, and the defense of the resupply route was watertight. There was no place for them to take action, and even if they only wanted to cut off the supply of food for 3 days, it was an extremely challenging task. This was only possible if they could grasp control of this ancient pass within their hands. Apart from that, the Zhao family would be able to repair any form of damage that they created in a short day or two. As for harassment tactics, that was completely useless. In front of this massive obstacle, all of Ling Tian and Ming Liji's plans were armchair theories. Ling Tian resolutely decided that things probably wouldn't end at just disrupting the resupply routes of the Zhao family. Since they wanted to play, they should increase the stakes and bring forward the final battle. A crazy battle intent burned in Ling Tian's heart. It is either this half of the continent becomes peaceful from now on, or the whole continent shall break out into chaos. Does young noble want to seize the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass? Ling Tian took in a breath of cold air. Even the reckless Ling Tian could not see any hopes for this plan to work out. The generals guarding this pass had always been the direct descendants of the Zhao family and would be loyal to the Zhao family to the very end. At the same time, they were also all experts among experts. How would it be an easy task to take over the pass in one swoop? Ling Tian was certain that if he and his young noble wanted to infiltrate the pass, they would be able to do so with a couple of martial arts experts and their movement techniques. However, it wouldn't be easy for them to retreat fully after infiltrating the pass, And as for seizing the control of the pass, a broken bar, even with Ling Tian's arrogance and faith in Ling Tian's strength, he felt that it was no more than a joke. A mysterious smile could be seen on Ling Tian's face. With our strength, it would indeed be a dream for us to capture the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass. But what if I said that we want to destroy it? Ling Tian had the sudden urge to roll his eyes with disdain. If not for the fact that Ling Tian was a deity-like existence to Ling Tian would definitely blurt out, "Young noble, do you have a fever? If there is really a way to destroy this pass, would the experts of the continent allow it to remain for a few hundred years?" Ling Tian could naturally tell what Ling Tian was thinking about and smiled. Under normal circumstances, my idea would be no more than a dream. However, there isn't anything absolute in the world. Ling Tian, have you seen these two mountain peaks? Ling Tian looked at where Ling Tian was pointing at and said, "These two mountain peaks lie behind the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass and are the two highest points of the ridgeline." "What does this have to do with our plan? Does young noble have other plans?" "However, how could these two mountains be moved by human strength?" Ling Tian sneered and traced out the Azure River with his finger and said with a devilish smile, "Even if our human strength is lacking, the forces of nature are unparalleled." A large amount of river water flows past these two mountain peaks, and after thousands of years of weathering, a precipice has been formed. The road which the Zhao family has been maintaining for 1,000 years is on the other side of the mountain. Even though the road is broad, there is only a single road with steep mountains on both sides. If these two mountains were to collapse, it would definitely cut off the flow of the river. At that time, where will all the water flow to? The river water will definitely flow into the mountain road and may even drown the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass. If that's the case, not to mention 3 days, even if the Zhao family was given 3 months, they may not be able to redirect the river water. If that happens, we would have destroyed the food resupply route, and even sending out a single soldier would be of great difficulty. If that's the case, the 450,000 soldiers on the outside would be left without any reinforcements. Ling Tian shook his head with a depressed look. However, why would the mountain peak collapse without a reason? It probably wouldn't be completely destroyed even if lightning strikes it. As for causing the mountain to collapse with human force, there isn't even a need to think about it. I naturally have a plan. Ling Tian smiled with confidence before his face turned serious. "Send my orders." Everyone immediately straightened their backs and sat up attentively. Ling 17, pick out a few guides familiar with the place to be the guides of these troops. Feng Mo's troops are to be split into 5 groups and will take turns to harass the lookout stations. Regardless of whether or not they are successful, they are to retreat after a single wave of attacks and are not to drag out the battle. However, the attacks must happen frequently and this matter cannot be delayed. As for the rest, collect large amounts of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. The more the better. I have my own use for them. Feng Mo, immediately send a message to the courtyard to ensure that the soldiers' morale is high. Regardless of the price, they are to defend against the attacks of Southern Jing and the Zhao family and wait for my good news. Besides that, inform the advisor to mobilize all of our troops. Apart from those at the Southern Jing's battlefield, all other troops are to be sent to the east. Command Shenru, who is to take a roundabout route to get here. They are to fortify their defenses and prepare for a bitter battle. Tell the general to get ready to swallow up the Zhao family's 400,000 man army. Over the next few days, the Zhao family's army will definitely fall into chaos. Send my orders to my father's army. The moment we start the battle with the Zhao family on the east, they are to swallow up Southern Jing in the quickest time possible. Ling Tian, order the remaining forces of the 1st Pavilion stationed in the courtyard to go down south and listen to my father's orders. They are to assist the army to the south and I allow them to carry out assassination missions. Within half a month after battle breaks out in the east, I want to receive news of Southern Jing being captured. They will then send their army up north and towards Eastern Zhao. Inform Dongfeng Jinglei to create chaos in Eastern Zhao within 3 days. Even if he has to sacrifice all of his men, he is to complete this mission. Tell Dongfeng Jinglei that regardless of how much he loses, I will pay him back double. But if he does not complete the mission, not a single member of the Dongfeng family will be left alive. I will not go back on my word. Ling Jian and Ling Kai, Pick out 100 elites capable of scaling this mountain and await my orders. They should be prepared to go past the mountain and I will have further orders for them. There isn't any room for negotiations and all of these orders are to be carried out immediately. Those who defy my orders will be dealt with by military law. Ling Tian then looked at the two tall peaks of fire with killing intent in his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Since we want to play, let us go all in. Let me see how the Zhao family army is going to survive after losing their food supply. In 3 months' time, I will unite my half of the continent and only leave the Zhao family's territory alone. At that time, the Heavenly Water Ravine Pass will be in my hands and the Zhao family won't be a cause for concern." Ling Tian grinned ferociously. "I originally didn't want to do this, but since the Zhao family has this natural indestructible obstacle that no power is able to threaten, a broken bar." Ling Tian's chuckle filled with killing intent made everyone present feel their backs turn cold and hair stand. It was a pity that Miss Li Zhu wasn't present today. Only Li Zhu would be able to guess what was going on in Ling Tian's head. If Li Zhu was present today, she would also be laughing and looking forward to the scene in Futuria Broken Bar. Even though none of the members present in this meeting could understand the rationale for Ling Tian's orders, they still swiftly carried it out because of the faith they had in Ling Tian. Ling Tian thought about everything that Ling Tian had said and could feel his blood boiling with excitement. Although he didn't know what Ling Tian wanted to do, based on his understanding of Ling Tian, this plan of his must definitely be one that will shake the heavens and will definitely succeed. If the young noble wants to do something, how would it possibly fail? Ling Tian had a sudden premonition that the whole continent would be transformed because of Ling Tian's orders today. A broken bar, a broken bar. Ling Tian stood up at the peak of the mountain and his gaze swept past the surroundings. Even with Ling Tian's eyesight, the bergs beneath the mountain looked like small little soybeans. The sky seemed to have been cleaned of all its clouds and it was blue for 10,000 miles. The cold breeze swept past Ling Tian's face and his black robes fluttered in the winds. His black hair drifted in the winds and Ling Tian stood guard behind him silently. Looking at the tall and slim back view of Ling Tian, Ling Tian suddenly felt a deep reverence. Even though they were only a couple of steps away from each other, Ling Tian felt as though Ling Tian was high up in the skies. In this life of his, Ling Tian felt that he would never be able to achieve such heights. Ling Tian's silhouette was clearly outlined by the sun and it seemed as though there was a layer of golden light covering him. 1,000 mountains and rivers were all beneath his feet. The world is like a painting. Who will rise and who will fall? Ling Tian's eyes were narrowed and a bloody killing intent flashed past his eyes. Despite only muttering a single phrase quietly, a powerful killing intent was suppressed within it. This was something that Ling Tian could clearly feel. Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.